Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. It's 4 a.m. here. We're talking about passion. And you kind of think that you wouldn't be up at 4 a.m. unless you were passionate about something. Well, this whole concept of passion is kind of overblown. In fact, if you ask me, the terminology is all wrong. And here's Benjamin Zander. In a TED Talk that has been watched over 9 million times, the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic talks about a 7-year-old child. And this is what the conductor, Benjamin Zander, says in his speech.
I want to remind you of what a 7-year-old child sounds like when he plays the piano. Maybe you have this child at home. He sounds something like this. I see some of you recognize this child. Now, if he practices for a year and takes lessons, he's now 8 and he sounds like this. And then he practices for another year and takes lessons, now he's 9. And then he practices for another year and takes lessons, now he's 10. At that point, they usually give up. Now, if he'd waited for one more year, you would have heard this. Now, what happened was not maybe what you thought, which was he suddenly became passionate, engaged, involved, got a new teacher, he hit puberty, or whatever it is. What actually happened was the impulses were reduced. You see, the first time he was playing with an impulse on every note. And the second, with an impulse every other note. You can see it by looking at my head. The 9-year-old put an impulse on every 4 notes. And the 10-year-old on every 8 notes. And the 11-year-old, one impulse on the whole phrase. I don't know how we got into this position. I didn't say I'm going to move my shoulder over, move my body. No, the music pushed me over, which is why I call it one-buttock playing. Can be the other buttock.
That's one-buttock playing. Instead of hugging the piano stool with both buttocks, the music takes over and you're just going along so that you're playing on a single buttock. People who try to find their passion are 2-buttock players. At the start of their journey, they're struggling to hit the right impulses. And this is because of the information that they get about passion. What we covered in the last episode was this concept of you need to stop looking for your passion. And we also realized that a lot of us think that we have to do something really well and then we have to be able to solve the client's problem. And there has to be this intersection point. And in the last episode, we got rid of those myths. But it doesn't stop us because the problem is that the terminologies are wrong. And that's what drives us crazy. So that's what we'll cover in this episode. And we'll also look at how do you know what to do if you know too much stuff? And what if you know too little? Let's start with the first thing, which is why this terminology is all wrong. Think about passion for a second, and what does it sound like to you? It sounds remarkably like love at first sight, doesn't it? If we would take the example of falling in love, you don't spend 5 years chasing after a girl or a guy to get their attention. Instead, it's quick, it's instant. Or possibly you're out and you're trying some new kinds of drinks, and then you run into pisco sour. You take a sip, then a second sip, and now you've fallen head over heels in love with it. You want to talk about it to everyone. You want pisco sour for breakfast, for lunch and dinner if possible. It's all about instant now, those magical moments. And that's what passion sounds like to everyone, whenever you bring it up in a conversation. But passion for your work is almost never like that. It starts out with some attraction, and then it goes to a bit of joy, and then there's frustration. And there's more joy and frustration, and more joy and frustration. And you go through this cycle. And then one day you're looking back at your seat, and you notice that both buttocks are not on the seat. You're no longer a two-buttock player. When people speak to me, they often tell me that I am very good at writing because without fail for about 40 weeks a year, I diligently turn out about 5,000 words a week. And that's the bare minimum. However, I had no passion for writing. I had no passion for writing 500-word articles, let alone 5,000-word articles. But I worked out a system, and in time I could turn out 500-word articles quite fluently. And then I got better, and I could turn out 500-word articles while conducting a couple of courses online. Not only was it easy, but it was fun as well. I was one-buttocking my way to writing. And then in 2014, I started writing longer pieces, and these progressively moved into the 5,000-word zone. As we were having coffee this morning, Renuka reminded me how I was getting very upset with her. And this is all the time. Well, really I was getting upset with myself. I couldn't come up with topics. Having to write articles with 5,000 words in them would drain me completely. So I'd reach out to her and ask her for ideas, and of course, it wasn't something that she could instantly come up with. This would cause me to complain, and quite bitterly at times. I'd say, "You aren't helping me at all." So that was a strange situation. I was a one-buttock 500-word writer, but a two-buttock 5,000-word writer. Then later, much later, in about 2017, that's this year, yes, something happened. I realized that writing an article with 5,000 words in it was not a problem at all. And I looked behind and, of course, one buttock was off the chair. Now I have the opposite problem. I have so many 5,000-word articles to write that I barely have the time to write them. I have about 5 or 6 of them outlined and ready to go. And by the time I write them, it will probably be a week or 2 from today, by which time there will be another 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 in that queue. The passion that I'm feeling for writing just wasn't there when I started Psychotactics. I got better at it, and then suddenly I could write 500-word articles. Then I could write 500-word articles with the courses, and now it's all fun and games with 5,000-word articles. There is nothing instant about passion. The idea of passion is all wrong. This one-buttock stuff, it just takes time. This is not like a drink like the pisco sour where you swig it down and then you have an instant high. This is often slow, boring, and consistently frustrating process. And it doesn't just apply to work, it also applies to, say, like an app. If I were to take an app like Paprika, I downloaded that app last week and fell in love with it instantly. I could use it immediately. I continued to sing its praises. I even spoke about it on the podcast. And I did a double spread cartoon about the app in my Moleskine diary. This experience with the Paprika app is diametrically different, opposite to the experience with Evernote. I didn't like Evernote. I found it hard to work with. I made excuses. I deleted it from my computer. I deleted it from the iPhone. And then I installed it again. Over time, as I learned how amazingly eccentric it was, I started to love it. And today I'm passionate about Evernote. How do I know this to be true? Because if you gave me the option of deleting one app and keeping the other, the Paprika's head would be on a plate in 1 second. I would never, ever, ever, ever give up Evernote if I could help it. So there is this passion that comes from joy and frustration and joy and frustration. And all of this idea that the starting point is going to be amazing just doesn't work. You're still that two-buttock player. And you will continue to be a two-buttock player until one day you sit back and you realize, oh wait, something's changed. But even as you come to this realization, there is a problem, and that is, where do you go from here? You know that passion is about one-buttock playing, but what do you do? The key is to start learning something that you think would work for you. Maybe learn how to do some pottery, or whip up some face cream, or learn how to build running shoes. Perhaps you're already skilled at something and you need to get the message out, and you need to learn how to give a better presentation or to write better. Wherever you are right now, it's where all entrepreneurs are at any point in their life. They're almost always in transition. There's almost always that point where you get a bit fidgety and you want to do something else, or at least the same thing in a different manner. Whatever it is that you have an inkling for, the only way to get the passion going is to keep going until you can look back and see that one buttock. Passion isn't a precise science, but it boils down to a few simple steps. You start, not necessarily knowing where you're going. Then you run into a lot of frustration until things start to ease up a bit. You aren't doing very well, but you still love what you do, and so you persist. And eventually, the tide turns in your favor. You get terrific, and clients think that you're close to perfect. It's not a precise science. It requires a great deal of focus and persistence. But that's how your passion works. That's how it will find you. And that's all I can really say. The journey is long and it's interesting. You may as well start today. But this takes us to the second part, which is, how do you find that intersection of passion? Especially when you think, well, I know too much, or I have too many passions, I have too many interests, I can solve many problems. And then there's the flip side, which is, I know not a lot. I don't know as much. I don't feel like I should be able to be telling something to someone else when I barely know anything myself. Let's explore that scenario in this second section, shall we? Around the year 1966, my mother joined a secretarial class. It so happened that my father was running that secretarial college, and they met there and they fell in love and they got married. But the point is that she'd left school and she probably at college, I'm not sure, but then she joined the secretarial class. Why did she join? Seems like such an obvious question with such an obvious answer. She joined because she wanted to learn a skill. She wanted to learn how to write in shorthand and be very quick at typing. When we start out in life, this comes quite naturally. Even before we finish school or after we finish school, we realize that we are not going to get a job. So we have to learn a skill. And we look at what we have to learn and then we learn it. Then we apply for the job, and if we meet the requisite needs, we get the job. This is not strange or unfamiliar to any one of us. We all know how the system works. Most of us have had to do some kind of job at some point, whether it's at home or work, and then we get the skills and then off we go. If you know nothing or you believe that you know nothing, you have to learn something. My mother never did join any company. She didn't become a secretary because, as I said, she fell in love with my dad and then they got married. But even when she got into her own home, her first home, she was very unfamiliar with the concept of cooking. And that's because my grandmother felt that that was her domain, and so she ruled the kitchen. So my mother had to learn those skills. Once again, there's no knowledge, there's no experience, there's no magic wand here. And then, yet, over the years, she turned out to be exceedingly good at dozens of types of meals. Almost everyone can create something if they're not physically or mentally handicapped. It sounds trite when you say, oh, this is so simple, but it really is that simple. To get a skill, you have to learn a skill. To get better at that skill, you have to practice that skill. To get good at muffin making, you have to burn some muffins before you get your Michelin stars. The same analogy applies to business. You can sit around thinking that you know nothing, can do nothing, and end up doing nothing. The result of all of this activity, or rather inactivity, isn't nothing. It goes a few levels below nothing. Suddenly, feelings of uselessness wash over you. You get this feeling that others judge you as well, that they're seeing you as lazy, as someone without direction, or just confused. But if you go back in time, you'll find that you weren't aimless. You weren't just wandering around. You'd pick a university, you'd pick a college, you'd do a professional course, you'd learn, you'd acquire the skills that you'd need. And it was just a matter of time before you had enough ability to do the task. Of course, there is a flip side to ability, and this is the factor of knowing too much. When I was just 25, I felt like I was a bit cursed. I adored Photoshop. I wanted to spend all day with it. But I also drew cartoons. And that was not a problem because I could use Photoshop to draw cartoons. There was no clash of interest there. But what if you can write and draw and dance and cook and find there are subsets of everything? Because cooking itself can involve Italian cooking and French cooking and Sri Lankan cooking and Thai and Malaysian and Indian. Suddenly the options are too many and the excuses increase with every subsequent option. Well, you have to kill some of your babies. If you see yourself as so talented, so very skilled, then you have to sit down and get yourself a nice big red pencil. And then you make a list of what you can do and you cross out everything else that isn't important right now, right this minute. You pick one and you stay the course. And then the question comes up again, what if it doesn't work out? We don't have any guarantees in life, do we? This is why we're stuck. We're stuck because we're looking for the guarantee, and there is no guarantee in life. You have to pick one and stick with it. Just like you do with a relationship. You go through the relationship, and then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You've given it your best. But you have to start somewhere. If you don't start somewhere, you don't get anywhere. You don't get anywhere, but you feel worse and worse with every subsequent day. And every time you see others looking at you, you feel worse than before. It's not just you staying at the same level. you get worse all the time. You feel like you're not going anywhere. In fact, you feel like you're going backwards. In the end, it's not about whether you have a passion or not. No one starts off wanting to be an engineer at a waste recycling plant. No one runs into the room as a kid saying, "When I grow up, I want to sell USB cables to the world." It's something that you find along the way. That passion comes when you play enough on 2-buttocks, and then you find you're having fun playing on just one. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. In fact, we finished both the podcasts, part 1 and part 2. In part 1, we looked at how you have to stop looking for your passion. Most people look for their passion. It's a waste of time. You're not going to find your passion. Your passion is going to find you. It's going to find you in the middle of something and at a point when you're not expecting it. Like, I wasn't expecting to be happy writing articles, let alone 500-word articles, let alone 5,000-word articles. Today, I'm happy with it. You can sense it when I write. You can hear it in the podcast. That passion didn't start out 15 years ago, 17 years ago. And I know 17 years sounds like a long time, but it passes pretty quickly. You have to start on the journey, because if you start looking for a passion, you're not going to find it. And that's what a lot of the people that stand up on stage say, start looking for your passion. Well, you're not going to find it. The second problem that we have is that we think that we have to have this intersection. We have to know something really well, and then somebody has to have a problem, and then we meet at that intersection. And that's not how it works. When I started out, I started doing little logos because someone asked me to do a logo, and they said, we'll pay you some money. Can you do a logo? I'd never heard of a logo. I went to the bookstore. I got a book. I looked at the logos. I did some logos. They rejected 10 of them. They chose one. Was I passionate about logos? No. Did I know anything about logos? No. Did I solve someone's problem? Yes. Did they pay me for it? Yes. And a lot of it is, okay, we have to be really good at this. No, you don't have to be really good at it. Often you're solving a problem when you're just one step ahead of them. Not even 5 steps, just one single step ahead. And as you get better, you could be 2,000 steps ahead of them. That's not an issue. Well, it could be an issue. Sometimes you're so much ahead of people and you know so many things that it's the very thing that drives you crazy. If you're passionate about, or you've got to the stage where you're happy to do photography and music and dancing and cooking and drawing and writing and speaking, and suddenly you go, wait a second, I want to do all of this stuff, and where do I start? What do I pick? Often that is a problem in itself. Well, it's only a problem if you don't have a big red pencil or red marker and you don't cancel out stuff. When I started out with marketing, I had to stop cartooning, which is something that I did for many years. And I did try to do both of them. I did go to both meetings where someone wanted cartoons and someone wanted marketing. And after a while, I couldn't figure out which meeting I was going to. I had to stop. I love photography. I love Photoshop, as you already know. I love cooking. Over the years, I've been able to add stuff into the mix. But I still don't sell books. I don't sell cookbooks, and I don't sell anything to do. Well, I do sell one little book on photography. That's what you have to do. You have to subdue the rest of it, start on one, get that going, then you can add the rest. So this excuse of, well, I know so much stuff, that's a problem. And if you know very little, well, you're 6 months away from knowing quite a lot. You might look at all those people doing courses online and you think, wow, these people are way ahead of me. They're not. Many of them are just 4 or 6 months ahead of you. And you could get there in 4 or 6 months quite easily. Not by pressing some magic button, not by doing some oh, we will get these customers to you, but by learning a skill, just like you would do when you finish school or when you finish university. That's what you would do. But above all, the thing that drives us crazy about passion is the terminology. We think that it has to be instant. We have to fall in love right this minute. And sometimes it happens, and most of the time it doesn't happen. Most of the time it's just grafting and frustration, and it just takes time. And you will be that One-Buttock player if you continue along that pathway. If you continue to study and you continue to improve your skills in that one area, you will become exceedingly good. People get stuck because they want a guarantee. Here's the guarantee. There is no guarantee. That is the only thing that is guaranteed, that there is no guarantee. When we started this episode about passion, we talked about how my wife Renuka got into the business of perfumery, didn't know anything about it, was actually a bit worse than a lot of other people who could identify Mogra and jasmine, and then she got very good at it. And this is true for everybody, without exception. Everybody. So what is the one thing that you can do today? If you don't have the skill, then you have to go out there and learn the skill. It's going to take you 3 months, 6 months, whatever. You want to learn how to write articles. You can teach someone how to write articles 6 to 8 months from now. You want to learn how to do copywriting. You want to learn how to write headlines. You want to learn how to do presentations. Or maybe you want to learn how to make muffins or bake a cake. All of this is achievable 6 to 8 months from now. If, on the other hand, you think, wow, I have so many skills that I don't know what to do with it, well, that's fine too. Get rid of 5 if you have 6 and start on 1. The thing is that if you're not going to start, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to go backwards. So start today, and what I would say is join us in 5000 BC, because this is what happens in 5000 BC all the time. People are getting stuck because they think that they have to do so many things, but what we do is we keep you focused in 5000 BC. Now, this is not a mentoring program. It's a membership site, but there is a Taking Action forum, and people get onto one task and they stay on that task and they finish off that task. And that's really one of the biggest things you can do if you're starting up a business or running a business. If you look at a client like mine, he's a friend now, David Green, he started out about a year and a half ago, started drawing cartoons. Now, he's a mortgage broker. He's not a cartoonist. You wouldn't know that. If you look at his work today, it's stunning. And it looks like it was drawn by a professional cartoonist. If he wanted to shift over to cartooning, he would have no problem. It just takes time, and he's passionate about it. He draws all the time. He draws wherever he can. He's sitting in his car and he's drawing. While waiting for clients to show up, he's drawing. That's how it works. But David didn't like cartooning any more than anybody else who just starts out on that journey. But that's what happens in 5000 BC. And David has been posting his postcards, and people have been going, wow, that's amazing, David. So 5000 BC is the place for you. If, on the other hand, you want to get onto learning a skill like landing pages, then Brussels is the place for you, or Singapore. In April of next year, that's 12th, 13th, and 14th, and then 18th, 19th, and 20th. We're going to have the first one in Singapore, the second one Brussels. That's April. We're going to start up. We're going to have a very small workshop with a few people because we want to really drive home that landing pages thing. If you want to fly across, then this is a good time. A live workshop is totally different from what you hear online. It's not the same thing. Just the travel, just going to the place, getting ready, going back, that is like 50% of everything. So much happens in that duration when you're just traveling back and forth. And then the other 50% is being at the workshop. A lot of people say, can we have a home study? Well, I started out, I couldn't afford to travel and do all that stuff. I started out with home studies. But occasionally, and very early in fact, I started making that leap into physically going to the destination, meeting people at that destination. It makes a huge difference. So I would invite you to Brussels or to Singapore. The Singapore one is first, Brussels one is second. This is April. Put it down in your diary. Wherever you live, get on a plane, get to Brussels, get to Singapore. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. I'll say bye for now, and we'll see you in 5000 BC. Bye-bye.